Hello, thank you for listening to this narrated presentation about Connecticut's growth model. This model applies to the Smarter Balanced Summative Assessments in English Language Arts, ELA, and Mathematics for students entering grades 4 through 8. The results from this growth model are a key component of Connecticut's Next Generation Accountability System for districts and schools. Here are the topics we'll cover in this presentation. What is growth? How is it different from achievement? What is Connecticut's approach to measuring growth? What factors are considered when establishing ambitious yet achievable individual student growth targets? How and when will growth be incorporated into the Next Generation Accountability System for districts and schools? To understand the differences between achievement and growth, let's start first with a simple definition of achievement. Achievement, or proficiency, or status, is a one-time snapshot measurement of a student's academic performance in a subject area like ELA or mathematics. Growth, on the other hand, is about the change in that achievement score for the same student between 2 or more points in time. Let's look at 3 ways to understand change in performance. The first, achievement change, simply compares student achievement for the same grade across years. For example, a superintendent may say that the proficiency rate of students in grade 4 in our district has increased from 50% in one year to 53% in the next year, an improvement of 3 percentage points. While that is technically accurate, this approach is actually comparing the performance of 2 different groups of 4th graders. The difference in performance between the 2 groups may be due to the fact that the groups are different to begin with. Maybe the higher performing group of 4th graders just started off higher. The second approach is something we refer to as the rough cohort approach. In this approach, for example, a superintendent may compare the proficiency rate of this year's 4th graders to that of last year's 3rd graders. If your district experiences little student mobility, and almost all students are promoted from one grade to the next each year, most of the students will be the same across years. However, if your district experiences high student mobility, a greater percentage of students across the 2 years will be different. The last approach presented here, the matched student cohort growth, compares the achievement of the same student from one grade in year 1 to the next higher grade in year 2. This is generally considered as the gold standard for growth, because there are no mismatched students. Only those students who are matched across years are included in this calculation. The matched approach allows us to quantify the amount of growth achieved by the same students from near the end of one grade to the end of the next grade, a good measure of curriculum and instructional effectiveness. So what is Connecticut's approach to measuring growth? Connecticut's growth model uses the matched student cohort growth approach. This approach is very similar to the one used in the past with the Connecticut Mastery Test, or CMT. The approach is criterion referenced, in that the amount of growth made by a student from one year to the next is evaluated against a fixed standard or criterion, and not against how other students grew. The criterion is based on the Smarter Balanced Vertical Scale for ELA and Mathematics, a scale that spans the grades from 3 through 8. The ELA and Math scales range from around 2,100 to 2,800. The growth model preserves the concept of the Smarter Balance achievement levels to support interpretation. It provides targets and an approach to evaluating growth against those targets that are both ambitious yet achievable for each and every student. The model expects all students to grow, including those in the highest achievement levels of 3 and 4. The individual student growth can be aggregated for group-level results. And lastly, this model was reviewed multiple times with Connecticut's Technical Advisory Committee, which is a group of psychometric experts from around the country. Now let's look at the factors that are considered when establishing these ambitious yet achievable growth targets. 3 main factors were considered. The first is the actual amount of growth achieved by students from 2014-15 to 2015-16. This growth was evaluated for students who started at different levels of performance on the vertical scale. Such a segmented analysis is done because we know that students at different levels of achievement on the vertical scale often exhibit different amounts of growth. Therefore, we wanted to ensure that the targets that are established are achievable for all students. The second factor we considered is measurement error. Psychometric theory tells us that a test score is an estimate of a student's achievement and comes with a certain amount of measurement error. When calculating growth, we are comparing test scores from 2 tests, each of which has some error. Therefore, when establishing growth targets, we considered whether the growth expectations exceed the combined average standard error from both tests. The third factor we considered was whether the targets put students on a path to higher levels of achievement in future years. The targets that were ultimately established were achieved by approximately 40% of the matched students. This is the annual growth target table for English Language Arts. Notice the 4 Smarter Balanced achievement levels on the very top. Also note that each level is divided into 2 categories, low and high, to yield 8 total categories for each grade. The scale score range for each category within each grade is listed in the corresponding cell, along with the requisite amount of scale score growth that is expected. Here's how you determine the growth target amount for a student. Let's say a 3rd grader has a Smarter Balanced ELA vertical scale score of 2,350 in the first year. This places the student in the High Level 1 category in Grade 3. By the end of Grade 4, this student will be expected to grow 71 scale score points from 2,350 or achieve a vertical scale score of 2,421. Let's take another example. Let's look at a 6th grader with a Smarter Balanced ELA score of 2,460. This places the student in Low Level 2 in Grade 6. By the end of grade 7, this student is expected to grow 53 points from 2,460 or achieve a vertical scale score of 2,513. And this is the annual growth target table for mathematics that should be read in the same manner as the ELA table. It is expected that these growth targets will remain in place for at least 3 years. Now let's look at an example of how the individual student level targets play out in the aggregate. Let's look at 4 students who have the exact same target of 60 points. Student 1 grew 42 points from one year to the next. This student did not meet the target, but achieved 70% of the target. Student 2 grew exactly 60 points. This student met the target and achieved 100% of the target. Student 3 grew 66 points. This student met the target and actually achieved 110% of the target. Student 4 grew 36 points. This student did not meet the target, but achieved 60% of the target. Overall, the growth rate was 50% because 2 out of 4 students met their target. The average percent of target achieved was 85%. That is the average of the individual student percentages of target achieved. So, the 2 aggregate statistics that will be reported are the growth rate and the percentage of target achieved. The growth rate is the percentage of students meeting their respective growth targets, while the percentage of target achieved is the average percentage of the growth target that is achieved by all the students in a group. The growth rate is a binary measure. It asks a yes or no question. Did the student meet his or her target? The percentage of target achieved, on the other hand, asks a different question. How much of the target did the student achieve? The growth rate is not a continuous measure. Students nearly meeting the target will be deemed to not have met the target, even if they missed it by just 1 scale score point. On the other hand, the percentage of target achieved is a continuous measure. Students get credit for any growth up to and even 10% beyond the target. The growth rate is simpler to understand, while the percentage of target achieved is a bit more nuanced. We will report both measures, but will include the more precise average percentage of target achieved in the district and school accountability model. Now let's look at how and when these growth results will be incorporated into the next generation accountability system for districts and schools. Growth is indicator 2 of the system. It will be added starting with the 2015-16 results. As is the case with the achievement indicator, growth points are awarded for the all students and the high needs groups. For any district or school with growth results, the points for the achievement indicators will be cut in half. As a result, growth will carry slightly more weight than achievement in the accountability system. And lastly, in February 2016, the ELA performance task was eliminated from the ELA assessment. Therefore, the ELA results from 2014-15 were rescored after excluding the ELA performance task and using only the computer adaptive test portion of the assessment. This enables an apples-to-apples comparison. For growth calculations, the rescored ELA results will be used. You may be wondering, so what about factors like poverty, English language ability, or student disability? To be clear, Connecticut's model is not a value-added approach where targets are adjusted or growth results are evaluated using some preconceived expectation of student achievement that is based on student characteristics. Connecticut's model does not set different targets for different students based on student characteristics. All students at a prior achievement range have the same growth amount expectation. Some people use the terms growth model and value-added model interchangeably. Connecticut's approach is indeed a growth model, but it is not a value-added model. There is no mysterious statistical calculation that is done to precisely quantify the effects of teachers, leaders, schools, or districts on student growth. Quite the contrary. Under Connecticut's model, the calculations are transparent. Anyone with authorized access to student test scores from years 1 and 2 can determine if those students achieved their target and how much of the target they achieved. To summarize, Connecticut's model is criterion referenced. It does not depend on how others do. It is continuous. All growth counts. There are no more golden bands. Unlike in the past, there is no incentive in this system to focus on getting a small group of students over the proficiency bar. Instead, the message here is that all growth achieved by all students counts. It is familiar because it uses an approach similar to that used with the CMT. It is transparent. Local districts and schools can replicate the results. There are no black box adjustments to the growth results. It is collaborative because the transparency allows for conversation and reflection among educators. It is fair because it excludes partial year students. Only those students who were enrolled in the same district or school on October 1st and at the time of testing are included in the calculations. It is achievable because it is based on the actual growth achieved by Connecticut students. And lastly, it is ambitious because the model encourages growth above the target. That brings us to the end of this narrated presentation about Connecticut's growth model for the Smarter Balanced ELA and Mathematics Summative assessments. We hope this has been informative. Thank you.